Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 21st of November 2023. There's quite a lot of content to go through in both the military aid segment and the geopolitics segment, so I might play it by ear, see how we get on and split it into two perhaps. Anyway, with regard to military aid, the US has announced a $100 million military aid package for Ukraine, and what is interesting about this is obviously we know that there's this hold up in Congress. This is, let's talk about there still being $5 billion of aid budgeted for already, and I don't know where we stand with that. So I don't know whether the US is not dipping into that as a kind of like emergency if it really needs to, and they just want this further funding going forward. So anyway, nonetheless, they have announced a $100 million package. Let's have a look and see what's in that. So what we have, the first thing to note is that there's a single HIMARS system and additional ammunition, but it's interesting, there's a system thrown in there as well. Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, 155mm and 105mm artillery rounds, as you would expect. TOW missiles for the tube-launched, optically tracked wire-guided missile system that sits on top of the Bradleys. Javelin and 84 anti-armor systems, more than 3 million rounds of small arms ammunition, demolition munitions for obstacle clearing, cold weather gear, and spare parts, maintenance, and other artillery equipment. People have been asking what winter gear has been donated by allied nations. Well, here's some by the US. UK donated a whole bunch of winter gear recently, and I'm sure other nations have over the past few weeks, month or so. I think that they have been given a fair amount of that. Right, about that 142 M142 HIMARS system, John Ridge here says there are three likely possibilities. One, or A, it's a replacement for a non-combat loss. So one might have, I don't know, malfunctioned, fallen apart, broken. They are getting used an awful lot. So they may just need to replace that. Two, it's a testbed for a GLSDB integration with HIMARS or MLRS. So perhaps they're getting one that can definitely work with the ground-launched small diameter bombs, these dumb munitions that have been adjusted and given a kit so that you can fire them out of a HIMARS or similar and get 150 kilometer range on them. So many people, myself included, many of you have been waiting for the GLSDB to hit the front line. So there's been talk about it right throughout the war, or for a long time during this war. The delay was that both Boeing and Saab, who manufacture it, had to construct manufacturing lines, production lines to make these. And I don't know whether there were complications. Maybe some of the old bombs that they were using and there had to be like radar scanned to make sure they didn't have any issues with them. They could be used successfully. I don't know if there are issues with the resources of those dumb munitions. Anyway, it could be that. C, Ukraine just needed an initial launcher for whatever reason. He thinks A is most likely, which is still to accept that, or to claim, I guess, by implication, that the Russians haven't yet hit a HIMARS, even though they've claimed to have taken out plenty of them. There's absolutely zero evidence that they've hit a HIMARS, and that talks to the capability of shooting and scooting with consummate ease. Anyway, there have been claims that some were hit in warehouses back, I think in Kramatorsk, Sloviansk area, sometime back, but we haven't actually seen any decent evidence of that having happened. On the American front here, the USA will be able to provide long-range weapons and ammunition to Ukraine, at least, quote, for some time. According to the Washington Post, the publication also adds that Austin's trip is a signal that American support for Ukraine will not be undermined by Israel's war against Hamas. And remember, there are claims that shell provision to Ukraine has decreased by 30% as a result of the Israel Hamas conflict. That's a real worry. But I think Lloyd Austin going to Ukraine kind of first, if you like, is a really strong message for Ukraine and a strong message for the rest of the world as well. Hungary has handed over 100 artificial lung ventilation devices to Ukraine worth over 3 million euros. The ventilators were first delivered to Lviv region and then distributed among medical institutions throughout the country. So thank you very much, Hungary. There, they are still continuing to give humanitarian aid. It's just the military aid they're not big fans of. Russian source Rebar claims that Armenia will transfer its Tochka-U ballistic missiles and a type of air defense missiles to Ukraine. This is huge, not only because Ukraine really needs that. They have 5 Tochka-U. There were thoughts that they'd use them all up at the beginning of the war, but then occasionally we see evidence of Tochka-U still being used, but the fact that they're being used so rarely means that they have very few of them left, these ballistic missiles, pretty large bits of kit. Well, if Armenia had given them to Ukraine, that's great for just having those things, but it also is a clear piece of messaging from Armenia. Now remember, this is coming from Rebar, don't know how trustworthy it is, but it's a clear bit of messaging from Armenia that, do you know what, they are on the side of the West and they're outside of the sphere of influence of Russia. Russia used to be the peacekeepers between Armenia and Azerbaijan and were much more on the side of Armenia. Yet for Armenia to do this is, as I say, it's just a very clear statement. Right, Japan has contributed to humanitarian demining efforts in Ukraine, and this is a considerable amount of kit by the looks of it, by donating a new set of equipment, including vehicles, metal detectors, and containers for fire extinguishing liquid. The support from, JICA Media, that's Japan International Cooperation Agency, and Japan's companies hold significant value for the Ukrainians. Indeed, when we look at a bit more detail, it seems that they've handed over 20 pickup trucks, 20 station wagons, 50 ALIS metal detectors, as well as 150 containers of fire extinguishing liquid donated to rescue workers. Good stuff, Japan. Thank you very much. Right. Meet Ukraine's Backfire. So this is a new drone. It's a powerful drone that flies up to 35 kilometers behind enemies' positions, behind the front lines, and causes colossal losses. That's the big claim here from Mikhailo Fedorov. He is the chap responsible for some of this in terms of in his government position as Prime Minister for Innovations, Vice Prime Minister for Innovations, Development of Education, Science and Technologies, Minister of Digital Transformation. So it's a big role. So it can go 35 kilometers behind enemy lines. The main feature of the drone is a powerful GPS antenna resistant to Russian jamming. The drone is being prepared for serial production and other tech supported by Brave One UA, that is Ukrainian Defense Innovations. Right, good stuff. And sticking on a drone subject, Ukraine's forces now have 3 more 3D printed drones. The Titan Falcon drones have a range of 400 kilometers and can fly up to 6 hours. The devices are being tested in operational conditions of Ukraine. Now, I presume that is 3 of these drones and not 3 different types of drones. They are all Titan Falcon drones, but they are 3D printed, so this is something that Ukraine can easily manufacture themselves. Ukrainian armed forces received the first 3,000 FPV drones from Operation Unity, according to Mikhailo Fedorov again. This is a joint collection of United 24, so the people responsible for the Army of Drones project, raising goodness knows how many hundreds of millions of dollars. Come Back Alive and Monobank, so those 3 people getting together to produce these drones under the moniker of Operation Unity. One of the largest donors, 10 million Ukrainian hryvnia, about $277,690 US, was made by Favbet. Earlier, Favbet also purchased 53 new off-road vehicles for the Army of Drones shock companies. And this is what I was talking about the other day with regard to the difference between Ukraine and Russia. It's not that either side can get the technological advantage, at least in the long term. The other side will always get hold of a bit of kit and match it tech for tech or whatever. It's about whether one side can get the advantage in terms of scale. And I think Ukraine have the ability to do that more than Russia. Due to the war in the Gaza Strip, supplies of used shells to Ukraine have dropped by 30%. That's according to high-ranking Ukrainian official telling the ABC News network. I've already just mentioned that today. And members of 146th Repair Regiment of the Ukrainian Armed Forces are undergoing training in Germany on Leopard 1 tanks here. So you can see lots of images of them, getting to know the ins and outs of the engine, how to repair, so on and so forth. There we go. Really important training, and a few more here, and we'll have a look at the video in a second. Getting that training under there. Jesus webs, it was so loud. I was so in the zone. I'm so sorry. I love music, apart from when I absolutely hate it. Okay, and here we have an engine. I'm really glad I took the time to show you a sideways bit of video footage with some music on it. Well done, me. Excellent. Yeah, good stuff. Anyway, that is the military aid segment. Well, what are we doing for time? Yeah, okay, let's go on to geopolitical stuff here. So, first thing to say, NATO members, Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria. And I talked about this in live stream last night with the Exit. Please go and watch that live stream. It was really, really interesting. Loads of great information on there. What another fantastic guest Exit was. So NATO members, Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria are close to agreement on a joint force to clear mines drifting into parts of the Black Sea as part of the fallout of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Excellent stuff. Now, this is a bit of a worry. This is from the Telegraph. The EU's thirst for fuel hands Putin a £5 billion windfall. So about $5 billion, €5 billion. Well, actually, 6.1 billion euros. So European Union countries have quietly funded Vladimir Putin's war machine to the tune of £5.4 billion this year through the purchase of liquefied natural gas, LNG. So this is where you take natural gas and you turn it into liquid form. You need the facilities to do that. They do have some. They want to expand that, but the Russians probably have a bit of a challenge in expanding that, given that a lot of the expertise has left Russia, and they're going to struggle under sanctions, but nonetheless they would like to do that. Despite a promise to wean themselves off Russian fossil fuels, the number of cargo ships carrying LNG from Russia to Europe has increased. The bloc has bought up more than half of Moscow's LNG exports, with Spain and France being the second and third largest buyers behind China. Eurostat trade data acquired by the Telegraph shows Madrid spent 1.8 billion euros in Moscow. Sent $1.8 billion euros to Moscow in the first 9 months of the year. Europe's second largest purchase is France, with 1.5 billion euros of shipments arriving in its ports, while Belgium followed closely behind with 1.36 billion euros worth of Russian energy. I mean, it seems insane to say we're going to sanction you, we're going to send weapons to Russia, to Ukraine to fight Russia, but at the same time, we're going to give you huge amounts of money. Now, I know it's difficult because your nation, everyone needs energy, right? You're used to having that energy. You can't just turn that energy off. But they surely must try harder to find alternatives. But the problem is, of course, with that amount of demand, you need that amount of alternative supply. And of course, that supply would otherwise be going somewhere else. So it's not so easy to just say, right, we're going to turn off that and we're going to get it from over there. It's not like, oh, I'm not going to buy a pint of milk from this shop. I'm going to buy a pint of milk from that shop. That's not going to touch the sides with regard to supply and demand of milk. All right, I'm not going to buy billions and billions of dollars worth of LNG from here. I'm going to get it from somewhere else. Who's got billions and billions of dollars of LNG that isn't then going to screw with global prices and do over someone else who is relying on that energy? In order to do over someone else, we've either got to break contracts so that those people aren't being supplied by the suppliers, or we've got to increase the supply to a massive amount that can't just be done like that. And if we're going to break a contract, or we're going to get that instead of you guys getting that, then we're going to have to pay more than what you guys are paying. In other words, it will lead to a huge increase in energy prices or energy costs for those nations in the EU, and that will then be passed on to the consumers. So this is difficult. Like, it's really easy to sit there and go, oh my god, whatever country you're talking about, you bunch of muppets, what are you doing? But if that was your country, or if you are in that country, then think how would you react if suddenly your energy prices went up X%, and it just might not even be feasible to find those alternative supplies anyway. It just might literally be impossible. It's like, we have to get it from Russia until those production quantities are upped with alternative sources. So I don't know the ins and outs, but be wary about slagging off people just as a knee-jerk reaction. The best thing is to do, okay, well, what are the alternatives? What are the solutions to this problem? Sales are expected to generate huge revenues for Russia at a time when EU countries are hoping to starve Putin's regime of funds needed to manage a war in Ukraine. Again, they would be doing something else if they could do something else. I think that's what's the takeaway from this. Like, they aren't going to be saying, we need to work really hard to sanction the shit out of Russia. We need to work really hard to get as much military equipment to Russia. Oh, by the way, we're also paying them $1.36 billion as Belgium, or 1.8 billion, euros as Spain. You're not going to be saying both of those things unless there's no other option at the moment. Previous analysis of European imports of Russian energy suggested purchases were up 40% compared to 2021. So this is like, we are not taking gas in from Russia through pipelines. Dang, we need gas. Let's get it from Russia by LNG. Now, the question for me, I don't know if it's answered here, is whether the LNG fully replaces one for one the Russian gas imports they were having anyway, or whether they are getting imports from elsewhere, like the US. I'm pretty sure they're getting a lot of LNG from the US. That's gone up. So it's going to be, we're not taking gas in gas form, natural gas from Russia, but we're going to get that in LNG form from both the US and Russia, which means I don't know if the overall income has still gone down for Russia. So this is despite plans in the EU to end its use of Russian fossil fuels by 2027. Since war broke out, and of course that can still happen, since war broke out, Europe's pipeline gas flows from Russia have fallen to historic lows, with LNG being used to make up for the shortfalls in supply. The block of sanctioned seaborne shipments of Russian crude oil and oil products such as diesel, it leaves member states exposed to any decision by the Kremlin to sever LNG supplies, as it did for the pipe gas last year. But however, if Russia were to sever their own supplies as kind of FU to the EU, they would be financially done for. So they're never going to do that. Earlier this year, Kadri Simpson, the EU's energy commissioner, called for the bloc to reduce its reliance on Russian LNG. Britain banned the import of Russian supplies of the gas last December, as well as blocking services relating to shipments. And again, be careful of this, because you might be able to sit there and go, well, aren't Britain cool? Why can't Europe do that? Oh my God, you guys are losers. Britain's awesome. As far as I remember, the reality is we get very little gas from Russia. So it's like, I think it was 5% of our gas. So we're like, yeah, we'll stop getting that. So if you're like, yeah, 100% of your gas, that's somewhat different. Okay, so just be wary of that. The US is, and I think this is the Telegraph, it's a very nationalistic kind of newspaper, sits on the right wing. They're going to be trying to say they were pro-Brexit. So they're going to be trying to frame this, anything they report. And I've had a go at Ukraine, the latest podcast that I love. I've actually talked to them about this before, in the way they framed discussion about the EU, particularly at the beginning of the war. And they're a little bit disingenuous. The fact that they don't clarify these kind of things shows that they are trying to frame Britain being the good guys and the EU being not as good as Britain. But I think what they're not saying makes this somewhat disingenuous reporting. The US is also trying to curb Russia's plan to become a major LNG exporter, with Moscow planning to produce 100 million tons of the fuel by 2030. Again, they need to talk. If I was writing this article, the 100 million tons means nothing unless I know where they've come from, what they're exporting now, what were they exporting at the beginning of the war. So, yeah, it's a bit rubbish. Sorry. Spain and Belgium have claimed their high purchases are likely as a result of traders storing Russian LNG at facilities in their ports. In September, Madrid's energy minister said there were no plans to ban Russian LNG despite the bloc's soaring imports. Quote, there is this feeling of scarcity and fear, Teresa Ribera said at the time, referring to concerns of an energy shortage. The Belgian ports of Antwerp and Zeebrugge act as hubs for access to 18 markets, including France and Germany, with only 2.8% of gas consumed domestically, according to government data. So in other words, Belgians buying of all that gas isn't for Belgium's consumption, it's for export then elsewhere into the EU. The European Commission, which produces sanctions packages on behalf of the bloc, said it's up to the member states to decide unanimously on EU sanctions. So I don't know where this goes, but something has to be done. Like, I'm not trying to get the EU off the hook here. Like, this needs to be dealt with because we cannot be putting money back in the Russian coffers. But it does require a complete rejigging of the energy markets, like globally and within the EU. And that is no easy thing. So I'd be interested to see what you guys think about this in terms of not like passing blame around, but what are the solutions to this? Again, there has been a move in the EU to a greater move towards greater reliance on renewables, which I think is great. I think it's a great opportunity, not just for environmental reasons and sustainability reasons, but for energy security reasons, and not putting money in Russian coffers. But of course you need consistent energy, so things like solar and wind will have peaks and troughs, and you need to underwrite that with things like, I don't know, nuclear and other stuff rather than hydrocarbons. But anyway, Russian military footwear companies import $4.1 million worth of goods from Europe. Again, this would surely is something that can be easily sanctioned, but it's clothing and probably not seen as military hardware, and so therefore gets the kind of green light. In 2023, Italian, German, and other European companies supplied the Russian army with footwear production components. The sanctions monitoring project Trap Aggressor reported that needs to be stopped, sorted out. Those countries with those companies. Putin's new, and what does this all pay for? Well, Putin's new super yacht. Putin's new $50 million super yacht, the 71-meter Victoria, costing $50.1 million, has arrived at a shipyard in Istanbul in late October, has been discovered there. It's a ninth of Putin's known yachts. Now, this is disgusting. So, aside from if this war never happened, I would still be saying the same here, which is, how can you have at least nine super yachts? You don't have time to use them. What's the point of having those? You don't even leave Russia at the moment, and you weren't very good at leaving Russia previously anyway, especially when COVID was around. What is the point of buying new super yachts like this? It's absolutely sickening use of money when you have such income disparity and wealth inequality in Russia. When you have so many people that are suffering from a lack of wealth redistribution, when you have an oligarchy and a kleptocracy where you're corruptly stealing money from your country, essentially, to line your own pockets at the expense of those people in your country that you are supposed to be serving, right? This is disgusting. So I don't want to sound like some lefty liberal socialist. This is just fairness. This is just... It is utterly irresponsible for one human to have so much money. Now, I say this because I have written on this before, and I'm just going to spend a second talking about this. I wrote an article back in 2020 called On Defending Billionaires. And it's this idea that people defend billionaires because they say, oh, they're wealth creators and we should give them tax breaks because that money will go towards creating wealth. It's utter BS. It does not work. There's no evidence to suggest this works. That kind of trickled down economics. The idea that it used to be called the horse and sparrow. You know, the horse would crap out the oats, eat the oats and crap out the oats, and the sparrows would peck at it in the manure. It's like the sparrows being like the poor people pecking at the crap that's left over from the top of the hierarchy. It's as if we give like tax breaks to the rich, it will filter down to the poor. It doesn't happen. Go and look at the evidence. Look at the Trump's tax cuts during his tenure that completely failed and screwed the Treasury income in the US, and then he added $8 trillion to the national debt. I mean, it's absolutely shocking. It's really interesting to see Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis very publicly now, and Chris Christie very publicly as Republicans vying for nomination for presidency, coming out and very publicly saying, you keep blaming Biden for the debt situation. It was Trump adding $8 trillion. So don't go and blame. And you've got 3 Republicans saying, hey, hang on, this isn't Biden's thing. This is Trump's thing. Now, that's really interesting messaging. Anyway, you look at in Kansas with the Brownback tax cuts. For they were like, we're going to do tax cuts, you know, and that will inspire people to set up business in Kansas, and we're going to get loads of income from tax revenues. Even though the tax is less, we're going to get more tax. The tax percentage is less. We're going to get more tax because more people are going to be doing business. Completely failed, and actually their public coffers went down a Swanee, and they didn't have the money to spend on public services because of tax cuts. And so therefore there is a sweet spot, but it generally, if you're going to do tax cuts, you're just trying to line the pockets of your mates. It's like the people in power doing tax cuts. Yeah, this is going to filter down to the poor people, and it turns out it doesn't. And in fact, the best way to stimulate the economy is to just pay the poor people, because poor people generally, it almost sounds like a pejorative, but people at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum will generally spend money. They're not very good at saving it. If you give money to rich people, they'll put it in offshore accounts. And that doesn't help anyone. They're not spending it in the local economy. If you give $1,000 to a rich person, you won't see that the $1,000 multiply. If you give $1,000 to a poor person, they will go out and spend it. And you might think, oh, what a waste. No, that money multiplies in the local economy. You should have a trickle up economic policy rather than a trickle down. But the problem is people in power want to line their own pockets and line the pockets of their mates. And so they do tax cuts. So any time a politician says they're going to do tax cuts because it's going to be better for the economy, it's going to be better for you guys in middle America, it's like generally it's BS. And it's just good for them and not very good for everyone else. Anyway, people also don't understand how much money $1 billion is. It is an incredibly large amount of money. And this checks out, by the way, as a figure. So if you worked every single day making $5,000 a day from the time Columbus sailed to America, so 1492 is that, to the time you're reading this tweet, you would still not be a billionaire. So if you earned $5,000 a day, if you had $5,000 a day, you can spend, I mean, come on, that's a lot of money. $5,000 a day since 1492 to now, you would still not be a billionaire, and you would still have less money than Jeff Bezos makes in a week. And that checks out. And so when we go about trying to defend billionaires, you could take all the billions of dollars off all the billionaires around the world and leave them with $1 billion, so they can still have $1 billion, which is a crazy amount of money, and you could solve world hunger for 282 years. So, going back, after my little rant there, going back to Putin having this yacht as at least the 9th yacht is completely grotesque. Construction of the yacht was started in Sevmash in 2005, completed in 2019. Formerly, it belongs to the structures of billionaire and Putin's close friend Gennady Timchenko. Because of the long delay in the construction of Victoria, Timchenko, in order to justify the trust of the president, ordered another yacht for Putin, 140-meter Sherazade, On an acquaintance of the businessman told the dossier. In total, Sevmash built 2 yachts for the president. In addition to Victoria, the plant launched Graceful. Now the 71-meter Victoria is being serviced in Istanbul at a shipyard that not only repairs super yachts but also builds warships for Turkey, a NATO country. And Kiev Independent, 2 yachts allegedly belonging to Putin discovered. An investigation has found into the anti-corruption project dossier center. So 2 super yachts. Just Ukraine is a place where Polish security is at stake. If Russia is not defeated, it will attack again, says Duda. Ukraine's support is obvious, or that support for Ukraine is obvious. I assume that the Polish authorities, regardless of which political camp they come from, will continue this policy. In other words, whoever takes over as a coalition government in Poland will continue to support Ukraine. However, Polish farmers have joined in the protests of transporters on the borders with Ukraine. There is now a 53-kilometer traffic jam of trucks on the border between Poland and Ukraine because of the blockade, Ukrainian media reports. So that is not good, and that does need to be sorted out. It is a real issue for not only relationships between the two countries, but just getting stuff in and out of Ukraine and Poland. Come on. Lithuania will fine companies for non-compliance with international sanctions and will send the money to Ukraine, as according to LRT. Good stuff. Excellent. Breaking. Finland is likely to close its entire border with Russia starting tomorrow. So that's tomorrow evening. So that's today evening, according to one of the country's largest newspapers. The reason is that Russia has started pushing large masses of Somali, Syrian and Iraqi migrants toward the Finnish border. I reported on that yesterday. Jens Stoltenberg, head of NATO, there's a concerning rise in Russian malign influence in Bosnia. Quote, the Allies strongly support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Bosnia-Herzegovina. NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said, we are concerned at the secessionist and divisive rhetoric, as well as malign foreign interference, including Russia. So Russia is involved heavily in ultranationalism in Bosnia and Serbia, indeed Hungary, and many of the nations of the Balkans. It's a real challenge. German defense minister has made his second unannounced visit to Kiev. He's there today. After arriving there, Boris Pistorius visited a memorial to the Euromaidan revolution and laid flowers commemorating the 10th anniversary of the start of the revolution in 2014. So their 10th anniversary things going on today. And there's also quite a few people visiting Kiev. So I don't know what's going on there, whether this is just random or whether there is something big to take place. President of Moldova, Maia Sandu, has arrived in Kiev. There's also the European Council President, Charles Michel, arriving in Kiev today as well. So a number of people there, and we had Lloyd Austin there yesterday. Zelensky's also met with Fox Corporation CEO Lachlan Murdoch in Kiev. Ugh. You know you're getting involved in normal business as usual Western politics when you're having to speak to the Murdoch empire. Nonetheless, Zelensky knows the importance of messaging. And actually, if you're going to get people like Fox News on board, then you need to speak to these people and you need to schmooze them and get them on side. As horrible as that sounds for me to say, and it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, kind of Zelensky and Ukraine need Fox News to give narrative. They don't want people like Laura Ingraham saying despicable stuff on their news pieces. They need the right messaging, and that needs to come from the top. So the CEO of the broadcasting giants Fox Corporation and News Corp, as well as journalists from Fox News and News Corp-owned tabloid The Sun, visited Kiev, and the president's office. So interesting. And in the same vein, 11 countries, 15 African journalists won truth. Under the initiative, Dmytro Kuleba, who's a foreign minister, MFA, so the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, organised a visit of African journalists to Ukraine to highlight the Russian aggression. So we know Global South is a big target for Russia in terms of disinformation, in terms of their information warfare. They are, Africa is hugely on the Russian radar with the amount of influence Wagner have had there over time. And now they're being replaced by PMCs or private military companies from Russia. This is still a worry. So Ukraine doing this is really sensible. highlighting Russian aggression and the consequences of, say, the blocking the grain initiative, telling stories of Ukrainians' resilience. So I think this is really good news. And savvy stuff, both with regard to Fox News and getting African journalists and movers and shakers in the information sphere. Right. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all your support. Thank you so much for that. Check out the live stream I did with Exit last night. That was really great. And my previous one with Jonathan Fink, equally great. And with Tim White previously before, equally great. So check those out. All got really fascinating things to say. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.